Rain pattered against the cracked window of Emma's tiny apartment, each drop a reminder of how far she was from home. The dim morning light cast long shadows across her few possessions, a suitcase still half-packed, a framed photo of her son, Samuel face down on the nightstand, and the one decent outfit she owned hanging on the bathroom door. Emma Carson traced her fingertips across the condensation on the window, drawing a small heart before wiping it away. Her first day as a primary school teacher in Chicago waited beyond these walls, and with it, the whispers she knew would follow. The Colombian accent she couldn't hide, the past she couldn't outrun. She straightened her second-hand blouse, practiced her smile in the cracked mirror, and stepped out into the rain. Perhaps today, in this sprawling American city, she could finally rebuild what had been taken from her. The school's brick facade loomed ahead as Emma hurried across the courtyard, clutching her worn leather bag against the wind. Children spilled from expensive cars, their voices a chorus of excitement that made her heart ache for Samuel. She had barely reached the entrance when she felt it, that familiar sensation of being watched, judged. "Foreigners like you, come, here to take our jobs," a voice cut through the morning chaos, just loud enough for nearby parents to hear. The speaker, a perfectly coiffed blonde woman, smiled thinly before turning away. Emma's cheeks burned, but she kept walking, head high. Despite the whispers that followed like shadows, Principal Matthews greeted her with a distracted handshake, his eyes already searching for more important matters. "Room 204, he said, handing her a key. "The Suarez girl is in your class. Her father's our biggest donor. Just be careful." With that cryptic warning, he disappeared down the hallway, leaving Emma alone with her racing heart and 23 unknown children waiting behind a classroom door. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she arranged papers on her desk, stealing glances at her new students. Most chatted animatedly, comparing summer adventures and new shoes, but one girl sat apart. Dark hair in perfect braids, expensive uniform, dressed immaculately, and eyes that carried a weight no child should bear. Luna Suarez. Emma had noticed her immediately, not for her designer backpack or the chauffeur who delivered her, but for her silence, a silence Emma recognized too well. When attendance was called, the girl barely lifted her hand. When groups formed, for the first activity, she remained alone. By lunch, Emma had learned from whispered conversations among teaching staff that Luna's mother had died the previous year, and since then, the girl had retreated inward like a wounded animal. Her father, widower billionaire James Suarez, had tried everything, therapists, private tutors, even a summer in Europe. But nothing had reached Luna's sealed heart. Something in Emma recognized herself in this child's quiet grief, and while the other teachers averted their eyes when Luna passed, Emma watched her, waiting for a crack in the armor, a place where light might enter again. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. Weeks passed in a blur of lesson plans and silent lunches in Emma's classroom, where she ate supermarket sandwiches while grading papers. The other teachers kept their distance, treating her with surface-level politeness that never extended to invitations or genuine conversation. She'd caught fragments of their whispers, something about checking her credentials, questions about her accent, suspicions about why someone would leave Columbia for a modest teaching position in Chicago. If they knew the truth about the powerful ex-husband who'd manipulated the legal system, about the 3 days she'd spent in jail for daring to challenge his custody ruling, about how he'd used his position as a judge to steal Samuel from her, they would have more than whispers. So Emma kept to herself, focusing solely on her students, especially Luna. Small victories came unexpectedly. Luna answering a question in class, Luna staying after the bell to help clean the board, Luna writing a poem about missing someone that made Emma excuse herself to the bathroom, where she sobbed silently for 5 minutes before returning with a smile. One afternoon, as rain once again lashed against the windows, Luna approached Emma's desk after the other children had left. "My mother used to say rain is just the sky missing the earth too much," she said softly, the first voluntary words she'd spoken in class. Emma's heart stuttered. "My abuela said the same thing," she replied carefully. "In Bogotá, where I'm from, it rains almost every afternoon." Luna's eyes widened slightly. "You're from Colombia?" Emma nodded, waiting for the judgment, the retreat. Instead, Luna said, "My mom was learning Spanish before she died. She wanted us to visit South America." A pause. "I still have her books." The moment hung between them, fragile as spider silk. Then Luna whispered, "Would you help me learn, so I can remember her?" Emma couldn't stop the tears that sprang to her eyes as she nodded. It was the first time she'd felt something like purpose. Since crossing the border 4 months ago, what Emma didn't know was that she was being watched. James Suarez, with his tailored suits and calculating gaze, had noticed the subtle changes in his daughter. Luna mentioning her teacher at dinner, Luna asking to arrive at school earlier, the small spark returning to eyes that had been vacant for so long. At first he'd been suspicious. Who was this foreign woman suddenly capturing his daughter's attention? He'd hired investigators, made calls, pulled strings to access files that should have remained sealed. Emma Carson, former university professor in Bogotá, ex-wife of Judge Ricardo Delgado, arrested for contempt of court during a custody hearing, fled Colombia after losing her son. The facts lined up like dominoes, each one adding to a picture that made James uncomfortable, not because it revealed something sinister about Emma, but because it revealed too much about himself, another powerful man who thought money and influence were enough to fix a broken child. Yet Emma, with nothing but patience and unspoken understanding, had done what his wealth couldn't. The realization left him unsettled, standing in his penthouse office long after his staff had gone home, holding the investigator's report and watching the same rain that fell on Emma's cracked window. Will Emma's past finally catch up with her, threatening the fragile connection she's building with Luna? And what will James do with the information he's uncovered about the mysterious teacher who's slowly bringing his daughter back to life? The parent-teacher conferences approached like storm clouds on Emma's horizon. She arranged her classroom meticulously, hoping her professionalism would compensate for what she lacked in resources and connections. The first few meetings went smoothly, polite discussions about reading levels and arithmetic progress with parents who barely made eye contact. Then Patricia Andrews arrived, the blonde woman from the first day, mother to bright but entitled Sophie. "Before we discuss Sophie," Patricia began, her voice honey-coated venom, "I think we should address your qualifications. My husband works for immigration, and he finds it interesting that someone with your background would be teaching American children." The room seemed to shrink around Emma as Patricia continued, "You were jailed in Colombia, weren't you? A criminal. And now you're alone with our children every day." Emma's hands gripped the edge of her desk so tightly her knuckles whitened. "My personal history is not relevant to Sophie's education," she managed, her accent thickening with emotion. "But I assure you, I am qualified." Patricia cut her off with a laugh. "We'll see what the school board thinks about that." She stood, gathering her designer purse. "I've already spoken with several other parents. Expect a formal complaint by Monday." After Patricia left, Emma sat motionless in the empty classroom, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like her racing thoughts. Everything she'd built, this small semblance of a new life, threatened to collapse. In Colombia, she'd fought and lost. Here, thousands of miles from home, the pattern seemed destined to repeat. She was still sitting there, numb, when a knock O came at her door. James Suarez stood in the doorway, his imposing frame softened somewhat by uncertainty. "Ms. Carson, I'm Luna's father. I believe we have an appointment." Emma quickly wiped away a stray tear and stood, professional mask sliding, back into place despite the earthquake happening beneath her skin. The air between them crackled with unspoken knowledge as James settled into the chair opposite Emma's desk. Luna's father looked nothing like Emma had imagined during their brief morning encounters, less the cold businessman and more a man, carrying his own carefully concealed wounds. "Luna wrote something," he said without preamble, sliding a folded paper across the desk. "Her first homework assignment in months that she's completed without me forcing her." Emma carefully unfolded the page, revealing a short essay titled Mi Maestra, My Teacher. In halting Spanish and perfect English, Luna had written about Emma coming from the same country as her mother's favorite books, about rain connecting, distant places, about how some people understand silence better than words. The final line made Emma's breath catch. "Ms. Carson knows how it feels when someone is missing." James watched her reaction with intensity. "How did you do it?" he asked quietly. "Reach her when no one else could?" Emma carefully refolded the paper. "I didn't try to fix her," she answered simply. "Grief isn't something broken. It's just heavy to carry alone." Something shifted in James's expression. "You lost someone too." It wasn't a question. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "My son. Not to death, but to injustice. His father used his position as a judge to take him from me. When I protested in court, I was jailed for contempt." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, hanging. In the air between them, James's face revealed nothing, but his eyes, so like Luna's, held something new, recognition. "The other parents," he said carefully, "they're looking into your background." Emma's hands trembled slightly. "I know." James stood abruptly, straightening his already impeccable suit. "Thank you for your time, Miss Carson, and for what you've done for Luna." He paused at the door, half-turned. "Don't worry about Patricia Andrews. Some problems can be handled." Before Emma could respond, he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of expensive cologne and the echo of a promise she wasn't sure she could trust. Have you ever felt judged unfairly for who you are or where you come from? Share your experience in the comments below. The complaint came anyway, despite James's cryptic assurance. Emma was called to Principal Matthews' office early Monday morning, where she found not only the principal, but 3 school board members and the school's attorney. Her stomach dropped as Matthews slid a document across his desk. "Allegations have been made about your background, Ms. Carson, specifically your criminal record in Colombia and the circumstances of your immigration." The attorney leaned forward, pen tapping an unsigned termination notice. "We'll need to place you on administrative leave pending investigation. Of course, if you were to resign voluntarily." Emma sat frozen, the familiar sensation of institutions aligning against her, pressing down like a physical weight. Then, unexpectedly, the door opened. James Suarez walked in without knocking, followed by an elegantly dressed woman carrying a briefcase. "I apologize for my tardiness," James said smoothly. "I see you've started without us." Principal Matthews blinked rapidly. "Mr. Suarez, this is a private personnel matter." "Involving my daughter's teacher, who has my full support," James interrupted, "and the support of my attorney, Ms. Winters, who specializes in employment discrimination." The woman beside him nodded cordially. "Before we proceed," she said, "I'd like to remind everyone that refugee status is protected under federal law and that foreign convictions related to civil disobedience in corrupt judicial systems don't constitute legitimate grounds for termination." Emma stared in shock as James continued, Additionally, as the school's primary benefactor, I'm deeply concerned about any action that might disrupt Luna's education. She's made remarkable progress with Ms. Carson." The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Where moments before there had been determination to remove a problematic employee, now there was caution, calculation. Principal Matthews cleared his throat. "Perhaps we've been hasty. A thorough review of the situation might be in order before any decisions are made." James smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Excellent. In the meantime, Ms. Carson continues teaching. Any questions?" There were none. Outside the office, as the shocked board members dispersed, Emma turned to James. "Why would you do that for me?" He studied her face for a long moment. "Luna smiles now," he said simply. "She talks about school, about you. I won't let anyone take that away from her." He paused, then added quietly, "Some of us with power should use it to protect, not destroy." As he walked away, Emma stood speechless in the hallway, experiencing for the first time in years the novel sensation of being defended rather than attacked. What James hadn't told Emma was how deeply Luna's essay had affected him. His daughter, silent for so long, had written about understanding, not just Spanish words, but the language of loss. That night, after the meeting with the school board, he found Luna in their home library, surrounded by her mother's Spanish books. "Dad," she said without looking up, "did you know Ms. Carson has a son, but she doesn't get to see him?" The simple observation carried weight beyond Luna's understanding. "How do you know that?" he asked carefully. Luna shrugged. "She has a picture on her desk she thinks nobody sees. She touches it when she's sad." James sat beside his daughter, noting the open notebook filled with Spanish vocabulary. "Would you like to invite Miss Carson for dinner?" he asked, surprising himself with the suggestion. Luna's eyes widened. "Can we? Really?" The excitement in her voice, so long absent, squeezed something in his chest. "Yes," he said. "I think we should thank her for being such a good teacher." Luna threw her arms around him, the first spontaneous hug she'd initiated since Victoria's death. Over her shoulder, James's gaze fell on a photograph of his late wife. The guilt he'd carried, for working late the night of the accident, for not being the one driving, for surviving when she didn't, pressed against him. Yet somehow, in this moment, it felt incrementally lighter. That night, he dreamed of Victoria for the first time without waking in anguish. In the dream, she smiled at him and said, "It's time, James, for both of you." He woke with tears on his face and Luna at his bedside, concern in her eyes. "Bad dream?" she asked. He pulled her close. "No, Mija. A good one, I think." Will Emma accept this unexpected invitation into the Suarez home? And as these three broken souls begin to heal each other, what happens when Emma's past in Colombia threatens to shatter their newfound peace? The dinner invitation arrived via Luna, who presented a handwritten note with shy pride. Emma hesitated, sensing boundaries being crossed, worlds colliding. The modest teacher entering the billionaire's domain, it sounded like the setup for a cruel joke. Yet Luna's hopeful expression made refusal impossible. The Suarez penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper, with views that made Chicago look like a kingdom of light. Emma, dressed in her only non-work outfit, a simple blue dress she'd splurged on at a second-hand shop, felt painfully aware of every scuff on her shoes, every imperfection that marked her as an outsider. James greeted her with unexpected warmth, while Luna proudly showed off the dining table she'd helped set. "I made place cards in Spanish," she announced, pointing to carefully lettered cards reading Papa, Luna, and Señorita Emma. Dinner was prepared by a private chef who discreetly disappeared after serving, leaving the three to navigate conversation that started awkwardly but gradually eased as Luna chattered about school. When she excused herself to fetch something, from her room, A charged silence fell between the adults. "Your home is beautiful," Emma said finally. James twirled his wineglass slowly. "It's just a place," he replied. "Luna's happier at school these days than here." The admission clearly cost him. Emma recognized the guilt in his eyes. She carried the same weight. "Children are resilient," she offered, "more than we give them credit for." He studied her face. "Is your son resilient?" The question pierced her carefully maintained composure. "I hope so," she whispered. "I have to believe he is." Before James could respond, Luna returned, carrying a small wrapped package. "For you," she said, presenting it to Emma. Inside was a worn Spanish-English dictionary. "It was my mom's," Luna explained. "She wrote notes in it. I thought, maybe you could use it for our lessons." Emma couldn't stop the tears that spilled down her cheeks. "This is too precious," she managed. Luna shook her head stubbornly. "Mom would want you to have it. She always said books should go where they're needed." James watched the exchange, something shifting in his expression. Later, as he walked Emma to her waiting rideshare, he said quietly, "Victoria, Luna's mother, had a gift for seeing people, really seeing them. Luna has it too." He paused. "I'm beginning to understand why she sees you so clearly." Daddy, under the glow of the city lights, with the weight of the dictionary in her hands, Emma felt something long dormant flutter in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or danger. The hours after school became sacred time for Emma and Luna. Spanish lessons, expanded to include stories of Colombia, cooking experiments with arepas, and quiet conversations about missing people. James often joined them, his initial stiffness gradually giving way to genuine interest and sometimes laughter. The three formed an unlikely constellation, each broken in their own way, but somehow creating light together. At school, the whispers about Emma decreased as Luna flourished, her academic performance soaring and her social isolation thawing. Even Patricia Andrews's hostility dimmed when her daughter Sophie begged to join Luna for after-school Spanish sessions. "My mother says, 'You're actually a good teacher,' Sophie announced one day with childish bluntness. She says Mr. Suarez wouldn't support someone who wasn't exceptional." Emma simply smiled, knowing the complicated adult world that shaped such statements. What she didn't know was that James had indeed been instrumental in changing perceptions, not through threats or bribes, but through the simple power of his visible respect for her. When James Suarez, titan of industry, personally picked up his daughter from Ms. Carson's classroom, engaged the teacher in earnest conversation, and eventually began bringing coffee for their discussions, the school community noticed. When the spring fundraiser needed planning, and James suggested Emma co-chair the committee, no one objected. Power reshaping narrative, a familiar dynamic, but this time working in her favor instead of against her. Emma felt herself expanding into this new space, cautiously testing its boundaries. During a parent volunteer day, as she directed a classroom art project with James assisting at one table, their hands brushed while passing supplies. The jolt of awareness that passed between them was impossible to ignore, though both pretended otherwise. That night, alone in her apartment, slightly larger now, with a plant or two bringing life to the windows, Emma stared at Samuel's photograph and whispered, "What am I doing?" The boy in the picture smiled back, frozen in time, offering no answers. The phone call came on an ordinary Tuesday, shattering the fragile peace Emma had constructed. Her former neighbor in Bogotá, speaking in rushed, excited Spanish. "Emma, there's a chance. A new judge is reviewing custody cases handled by Ricardo. Corruption accusations. You could reopen Samuel's case, but you need to come quickly." Emma's hands shook so badly she dropped the phone. Samuel, a chance to hold her son again, to reclaim what had been stolen. Yet returning to Colombia meant risking everything: imprisonment if Ricardo's influence persisted, losing her job here, abandoning Luna just when the girl had begun to trust again. The thought of Luna sent Emma reaching for her phone, James's number highlighted on the screen. They had grown closer over the past months, their text conversations extending beyond Luna to books they both enjoyed, childhood memories, quiet observations about life. Something unnamed but precious had formed between them, something Emma now feared sacrificing. When she called, James listened without interruption as she explained the situation, her voice breaking. "I have to try," she finished. "Even if it means losing everything here. He's my son." The silence stretched so long, Emma feared they'd been disconnected. Finally, James spoke. "You won't lose everything." A pause. "What do you need?" The question, simple, profound in its offering, brought fresh tears. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm scared." His response came without hesitation. "Then we'll figure it out together." That night, as Emma began the heartbreaking process of packing, preparing once again to leap into uncertainty, her doorbell rang. James stood there looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I have resources," he said without preamble. "Contacts, a good lawyer already on retainer in Bogota." He hesitated. "Let me help you, for Luna's sake and for mine." In that moment, standing in her humble doorway, with the most powerful man she'd ever known, offering his strength to her cause, Emma recognized the astonishing truth. She was no longer fighting alone. Emma's return to Bogota felt like stepping into a dream. Familiar streets now foreign, old wounds newly raw. James had insisted on accompanying her, arranging everything with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to bending the world to his will. "Luna's with my sister," he explained. "On the flight, she made me promise to bring you back." The words "bring you back" echoed in Emma's mind, a promise she feared could not be kept. Reality struck mercilessly when they reached the courthouse. Ricardo's influence remained strong enough that Emma was detained the moment she filed her petition, accused of attempting to violate the existing custody order. As guards led her away, James's face was the last thing she saw, shock transforming into a cold determination she recognized from boardroom photographs in business magazines. From her holding cell, Emma heard the commotion, American voices, demands for consular representation, calls being made to Washington. Hours stretched into a day, panic giving way to numb resignation. Then, unexpectedly, the cell door opened. A different judge stood there with James, whose tailored suit looked rumpled from sleepless hours. "You're released into Mr. Suarez's custody," the judge said stiffly, "pending tomorrow's hearing." Outside, in the sticky Bogota evening, Emma collapsed against a wall. "How?" she managed. James's expression was grim. "Let's just say your ex-husband isn't the only one with connections. And I brought receipts, documents showing his pattern of judicial misconduct. The U.S. Embassy is suddenly very interested in an American teacher being detained on dubious charges." He hesitated, then added softly, "I also showed them Luna's letters about you. Sometimes the most powerful testimony comes from children." That night, in the safety of a guarded hotel suite, Emma finally allowed herself to voice her deepest fear. "What if I still lose? What if all of this is for nothing?" James took her hand, his touch steady and warm. "Then we go home, together, and find another way." The word home hung between them, its meaning transformed into something neither had anticipated when this journey began. In the grand wood-paneled courtroom, Samuel entered first, 9 years old now, taller than in the photograph Emma carried, his eyes wary as they swept the room and found her face. The moment stretched like glass about to shatter, Emma frozen, in fear that he wouldn't remember her. that Ricardo's poison had worked too well. Then, in a rush of movement that defied the bailiff's instructions, Samuel broke free and ran to her, his small body colliding with hers in a desperate embrace that answered every unspoken question. "Mama!" he sobbed against her shoulder. "T'ai encontré! I found you." Emma held him with the fierce certainty that she would never again let go, no matter what the court decided. James stood nearby, his presence a silent bulwark against the storm. About to break, Ricardo arrived last, his handsome face twisting in fury at the tableau before him. The hearing proceeded like scenes from a dream, evidence of Ricardo's misconduct presented by James's attorney, testimony from court clerks who had feared coming forward before, Samuel himself speaking with surprising clarity about his father's rage, his loneliness, his constant questions about his mother that went unanswered. When the new judge, a woman with steel-grey hair and unwavering eyes, rendered her decision granting Emma full custody with supervised visitation for Ricardo, the courtroom erupted. Ricardo lunged forward, his facade of dignity crumbling. As he shouted threats, security restrained him as the judge added a restraining order to her ruling. Through it all, Emma held Samuel against her, shielding him from the spectacle of his father's downfall. It was James who guided them through the chaos, his arm protective around both as they emerged into sunlight and freedom. In the quiet of their hotel room later, Samuel sleeping soundly for the first time in days, Emma turned to James with overflow of emotion she could no longer contain. "You risked everything, your business meetings, your reputation. For us. Why?" James looked at Samuel's sleeping form, then back to Emma, his expression stripped of its usual careful control. "Because some things matter more than power or money," he said simply. "Because watching you fight for your son made me remember who I was before Victoria died, someone who believed in justice, in love." The word hung between them, neither ready to claim it, yet both recognizing its presence. "Luna needs you," he continued. "I need you. Come home with us." Emma's hand found his in the half-light. "Home," she repeated, the word no longer foreign on her tongue. Luna's face pressed against the airport window as their plane touched down in Chicago, her excitement barely contained. "Will Samuel like me?" she asked for the dozenth time. "What if he doesn't want to—" She stopped, uncertain how to name what they were becoming. Emma squeezed her hand. "He will love you," she promised. "He already does. From all your letters." Beside them, James watched with quiet wonder the family forming before his eyes, not from obligation or convention, but from choice and courage and second chances. As they navigated customs, Samuel clutching Emma's hand while examining everything. With wide eyes, a familiar face waited beyond the barriers. Patricia Andrews, flanked by several parents from school. Emma's steps faltered, old fear rising. But Luna marched forward with the confidence of her father, stopping directly in front of the woman who had once tried to destroy her teacher's career. "This is my brother, Samuel," she announced boldly. "He's coming to live with us. And Ms. Carson is going to be my mom soon." The last declaration brought shocked looks from both Emma and James, though neither contradicted her. Patricia's perfectly maintained expression cracked slightly as she looked from the fierce little girl to the newly reunited mother and son, and finally to James Suarez, whose protective stance made his position unmistakable. "Welcome home," she said finally, extending a hand to Emma. "The school community has prepared a welcome for Samuel." Behind her, other parents nodded, offering tentative smiles where once there had been only judgment. The gesture, imperfect, perhaps politically motivated, but real nonetheless, marked the final barrier crumbling. As they walked through the terminal, Luna slipped her hand into Samuel's, chattering in Spanish about the room they'd prepared for him. James's arm found its way around Emma's waist, solid and certain. "Welcome home," he echoed softly, for her ears alone. Emma leaned slightly into his strength, watching their children walk ahead. Luna gesturing wildly about Chicago landmarks, Samuel nodding with serious attention. From poor foreign teacher to part of a family that crossed boundaries of language, culture, and class, not by denying differences, but by recognizing the universal language of loss and love that connected them all. 6 months later, Emma stood in the garden of James's home, their home now, watching Samuel and Luna chase fireflies in the summer twilight. Her simplified green card application, expedited through James's connections, and her documented persecution had been approved. The principal had offered her a permanent position with a special focus on multicultural education. The parents who had once whispered about her now sought her advice about raising children with global awareness. Life had transformed so completely that sometimes she woke frightened, certain it must be a dream. On those nights, James held her until the panic subsided, his presence anchoring her to this new reality. "Penny for your thoughts," he said now, joining her by the garden wall. Emma smiled. "I was thinking about boxes," she said. At his questioning look, she continued, "When I arrived here, my whole life fit in 2 boxes. Now—" She gestured toward the children, the house, him. "Now, I couldn't fit my happiness in 100. James's hand found hers, the engagement ring on her finger catching the last light of day. "Luna asked me something interesting today," he said. "She wanted to know if Samuel will take our last name when we get married, or if we'll all take yours." The question, practical, profound in its implication of permanent belonging, brought tears to Emma's eyes. "What did you tell her?" James smiled. "I said we should probably ask you and Samuel. That families are built on choices, not just legal documents." Emma watched as Luna showed Samuel how to catch a firefly in his cupped hands, their laughter rising into the darkening sky. "We already are a family," she said softly. "The name is just a detail." James pulled her close, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. "From across the world, against impossible odds, we found each other," he murmured into her hair. "Some would call that fate." Emma thought of all the broken pieces that had somehow fit together to create this mosaic. Her flight from injustice, Luna's grief, James's loneliness, Samuel's resilience. "I call it choosing love," she replied, "every single day." Above them, stars appeared one by one, witnesses to the family gathered below, not formed by blood, but by the courage to see each other when the rest of the world looked away. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.